Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Missouri. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time at which you're listening to this narration. We're interested to know in which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The year was 1867. The American Civil War had ended just 2 years prior, leaving the nation wounded and struggling to heal. In the rugged, isolated hills of the Missouri Ozarks, most folks were simply trying to rebuild their lives. Roads were primitive then, little more than dirt paths carved into the wilderness, connecting scattered settlements. For travelers, the journey through these hills could take days, and safe shelter was a blessing sought after sunset. Along one such road, approximately 17 miles northeast of Springfield in Webster County, stood a modest cabin that many travelers remembered passing. It wasn't marked on any maps, but locals knew it as the Stillwell Place, named after the two brothers who had settled there sometime around 1863. The cabin sat back from the road about 50 yards, partially obscured by a stand of oak trees, with a small hand-painted sign that simply read, "Water and Rest for Weary Travelers." The Stillwell brothers, Elias, the elder at 37, and Jeremiah, 34, were known to offer water from their well and sometimes a meal or place to sleep for those passing through. They kept to themselves mostly, though they would occasionally venture into the nearby town of Marshfield for supplies. Neighbors described them as quiet men who didn't cause no trouble. The brothers had arrived during the turmoil of the war, and like many who appeared in those chaotic times, few questioned their origins or past. On December 12, 1867, a postal carrier named Thomas Weston was making his route through Webster County when a heavy snow began to fall. According to the statement he later provided to county officials, he sought shelter at the Stillwell cabin as he had done twice before. What he discovered there would lead to one of the most disturbing investigations in Ozark history, one that, despite initial scrutiny, would ultimately be classified as an unsolved cold case for nearly a century. What follows is a documented account assembled from county records, newspaper articles from the Springfield, Missouri Weekly Patriot, personal testimonies, and evidence collected by the Webster County Sheriff's Department in 1867 and 1868. Some records were later recovered during a courthouse renovation in 1952, providing additional details previously thought lost. As the winter of 1867 settled over the Ozarks, no one suspected that the Stillwell brothers had been serving travelers something far more sinister than water. Their hospitality concealed secrets that would haunt Webster County for generations. Thomas Weston's postal route took him through some of the most remote parts of the county. At 31 years old, he was no stranger to the hardships of the trail, having served as a scout during the war. The snow was coming down heavily that December afternoon, and visibility was poor. He later testified that he almost missed the turn to the Stillwell Place, only noticing it when his horse stopped suddenly near the path. The cabin looked different somehow, Weston stated in his report. No smoke from the chimney, despite the cold. No lantern in the window, like there usually was. He approached cautiously, noting that there were no fresh tracks in the snow, which struck him as odd. The Stillwells rarely left their property during winter months. Weston claimed he called out several times before trying the door, which he found unlocked. The interior was dark and unusually cold. A half-eaten meal sat on the table, the food hardened with frost. The fireplace contained only cold ashes. Most striking, according to Weston, was the silence. It was the kind of quiet that makes a man's ears ring, he wrote. A search of the cabin revealed no sign of the brothers. Their coats still hung by the door. Their rifles remained mounted above the fireplace. It appeared they had simply vanished in the middle of a meal. Weston, concerned and confused, decided to continue to Marshfield, despite the worsening weather, to report his discovery to Sheriff James Harrington. Initial assumptions were simple. Perhaps the brothers had gone hunting and gotten caught in the storm. Maybe they had relatives nearby they'd gone to visit. But something about the abandoned meal troubled the sheriff enough to assemble a search party the following day. What they found, or rather, what they didn't find, marked the beginning of a mystery that would only deepen with time. The Stillwell brothers had appeared in Webster County during the summer of 1863, a time when the war had turned the Ozarks into a lawless frontier. Missouri, a border state with divided loyalties, saw some of the most vicious guerrilla fighting of the conflict. Amid this chaos, two brothers purchasing a plot of land and building a cabin raised few eyebrows. According to land records recovered in 1952, Elias and Jeremiah Stillwell bought their property from a widow named Margaret Holloway, whose husband had been killed at the Battle of Wilson's Creek. They paid in gold coins, which was unusual enough to be mentioned in the deed. The brothers claimed to be from Kentucky, though they offered little else about their background. Martha Simmons, who ran the general store in Marshfield at the time, recalled the brothers in a journal found among her personal effects after her death in 1881. The Stillwell men keep to themselves, but are always proper in their dealings, she wrote. The younger one, Jeremiah, has a nervous manner about him, always watching the door. The elder speaks for them both most times. They purchase large quantities of coffee, salt, and other preserving agents. When asked, Elias said they smoke meat to last the winter, though I never seen them buy much in the way of livestock. The brothers quickly established a reputation for offering clean water to travelers. Their well, dug deeper than most in the area, provided cool, clear water even during dry spells. Within a year, they had added a small lean-to shelter where travelers could rest if needed. By 1865, they occasionally offered meals for a small fee or trade goods. Jacob Miller, a cattle driver who used the road frequently, gave a statement in January 1868 that sheds light on the brothers' operation. They'd have stew ready most days, good, hearty stuff. Said they hunted their own meat, never saw them do much farming, though they had a small garden patch. The older one, Elias, he'd make conversation while the younger one tended to the horses or fetched water. Looking back, I can't recall ever seeing any other travelers there when I stopped, though they spoke of having many visitors. The Stillwells seem to exemplify the frontier hospitality necessary for survival in such isolated regions. Their establishment was modest, but provided a welcome respite for those traveling the difficult road between Springfield and points northeast. Nothing in their observed behavior suggested anything amiss. Yet, after the brothers' disappearance, a thorough search of their property would reveal troubling inconsistencies in the peaceful image they had cultivated. Sheriff Harrington's search party arrived at the Stillwell property on December 13, 1867. The snowfall had stopped, leaving 8 inches of pristine white covering the landscape. 6 men, including the sheriff and Thomas Weston, carefully examined the cabin and surrounding area. The official report, filed with the county clerk and recovered during the 1952 renovation, detailed their findings. No signs of struggle within the dwelling. Brothers' personal effects appear undisturbed. Unusual discovery of ledger book beneath floorboard under Elias Stillwell's bed. Book contains names, dates, and notations of value received, though meaning unclear. Some pages appear to have been removed. This ledger would become a central piece of evidence, though its full significance wasn't immediately apparent. It contained 37 entries dating from October 1863 to November 1867, each with a name, date, and cryptic notations about items of value. Some entries were marked with a simple X. The search extended to the property's outbuildings. A small barn, a smokehouse, and a storage cellar dug into the hillside behind the cabin. The barn contained a single mule and evidence of at least 2 horses, now missing. The smokehouse held several cuts of meat which the searchers initially assumed to be venison or pork. It was the cellar that yielded the first truly disturbing discovery. Sheriff Harrington's report describes it as follows. Root cellar extends approximately 15 feet into hillside. Wooden shelves contain preserved goods consistent with normal household stores. However, rear wall appears to have been recently excavated, revealing narrow tunnel. Tunnel extends additional 27 feet, terminating in chamber roughly 8 feet by 10 feet in dimension. chamber contains numerous personal effects, watches, rings, clothing items, papers. All appear to belong to different individuals. Most troubling discovery, 32 pairs of boots and shoes of varying sizes, some showing considerable wear, others appearing nearly new. The collection of personal items was extensive enough to suggest they had been gathered over several years. None of the items matched descriptions of the Stillwell brothers' known possessions. The implication was clear. These belongings had likely been taken from others, presumably travelers who had stopped at the cabin. Yet no bodies were found, no blood evidence, nothing to conclusively prove violence had occurred. The most incriminating evidence was circumstantial. Why would the brothers have a hidden chamber filled with strangers' belongings? The search party expanded their efforts, combing the surrounding woods and checking the well, but the heavy snow hampered their progress. Sheriff Harrington ordered the property sealed and posted guards to prevent tampering with potential evidence, while he returned to Marshfield to organize a more thorough investigation. Word spread quickly through the county. The mysterious disappearance of the Stillwell brothers, combined with the discovery of the hidden chamber, created a sensation. The Springfield, Missouri Weekly Patriot ran a front-page story on December 17, 1867, with the headline, "Strange Disappearance in Webster County, Foul Play Suspected." As winter's grip tightened on the Ozarks, residents began to recall details about the Stillwell brothers that had seemed insignificant before, but now took on sinister overtones. The Stillwell cabin stood empty and silent through the winter of 1867 to 68. Sheriff Harrington had it locked and regularly patrolled, though few locals ventured near the property after rumors began to spread. The investigation continued despite the challenges of the season, with Harrington interviewing anyone who had dealings with the brothers. A more detailed examination of the ledger book found under the floorboards provided the first substantial clues. Each entry followed a pattern, a name, a date, a notation about items of value, watches, coins, a fine coat, etc., and occasionally details about a destination. Entries marked with an X included an additional notation about the quality of goods. The final entry, dated November 29, 1867, read, J. Hammond, Springfield Merchant. Gold timepiece, $37 notes. Quality goods. X. Sheriff Harrington cross-referenced these names with reports of missing persons and found several matches. Joseph Hammond, a Springfield merchant, had indeed been reported missing by his family after failing to return from a business trip to St. Louis in late November. Similarly, William Cooper, listed in an entry from July 1867, had disappeared while traveling to visit relatives in Springfield. The implications of these matches were disturbing, but still circumstantial. Without bodies or witnesses, proving that the Stillwell brothers had been involved in disappearances remained challenging. Throughout January and February of 1868, Sheriff Harrington meticulously compiled a list of all travelers reported missing along the routes near the Stillwell property. The list eventually contained 23 names dating back to late 1863, shortly after the brothers had established themselves in the area. One name on the list proved particularly significant. Reverend Michael Donovan, a circuit preacher known to travel throughout the Ozarks, had disappeared in April 1866 while journeying from Springfield to Lebanon. His name appeared in the ledger with the notation, Man of Cloth, Silver Cross, Few Coins, Books of No Value. X. Reverend Donovan's congregation in Lebanon had conducted extensive searches when he failed to arrive, but no trace of him had been found. The discovery of his name in the ledger prompted a renewed search focusing specifically on the areas around the Stillwell property. On February 23, 1868, during a brief thaw, Sheriff Harrington's deputies found a shallow grave approximately half a mile from the cabin, concealed in a thicket of brambles. The grave contained the remains of a man wearing the tattered remnants of clerical clothing. A silver cross, mentioned in the ledger entry, was notably absent. The discovery of Reverend Donovan's remains provided the first concrete evidence that the Stillwell brothers had been involved in at least one disappearance. However, the condition of the remains raised troubling questions. According to Dr. Hayes's examination notes, the body showed evidence of extensive post-mortem processing. Flesh removed from majority of bones with precision, suggesting knowledge of anatomy. Long bones broken at ends in manner consistent with marrow extraction. This grim finding suggested something far more disturbing than simple robbery and murder. It hinted at practices so depraved that even hardened frontier lawmen were reluctant to consider the implications. In March 1868, when the ground had thawed enough for more extensive digging, Sheriff Harrington organized a thorough search of the property. County records indicate that 20 men participated, systematically excavating areas around the cabin, barn, and cellar. What they discovered was described in clinical terms in the official report, but newspaper accounts were more explicit. The Springfield, Missouri Weekly Patriot's March 19, 1868 edition reported, "Grim discovery at Stillwell Farm. Human remains unearthed." According to the official record, investigators found human remains in 3 locations on the property: in a deep pit behind the barn scattered in the wooded area approximately 200 yards northwest of the cabin, and, most disturbing, sealed within the walls of the smokehouse. Forensic science was primitive in 1868, but Dr. William Hayes, the county physician who examined the remains, estimated they belonged to at least 7 different individuals. His notes, preserved in the county archives, indicate that some bones showed evidence of being processed with tools similar to those used in butchering animals. The most damning evidence came from the smokehouse. Among the hanging meats that the search party had initially assumed to be venison or pork, Dr. Hayes identified cuts that were unmistakably human in origin. His report states simply, "Certain preserved meats appear to be of human derivation, prepared in a manner suggesting knowledge of anatomy and preservation techniques." The implications were horrifying. The Stillwell brothers had apparently been killing travelers, taking their valuables, and, most unthinkably, processing their remains as food, which they then served to subsequent travelers who stopped at their cabin. Yet, the brothers themselves were still missing. No trace of Elias or Jeremiah Stillwell was found during the search, leaving investigators to wonder if they had fled, or perhaps met with violence themselves. The abandoned meal on their table remained an unexplained detail. The case took another turn in April 1868 when a man named Theodore Palmer came forward with information. Palmer, a trapper who often worked the remote areas of the county, claimed to have encountered Jeremiah Stillwell on December 11, 1867, the day before the brothers' disappearance was discovered. "I was checking my lines up near Beaver Creek, maybe 5 miles north of their place," Palmer stated in his affidavit. "Saw a man on horseback leading another horse with a bundle tied to it. Recognized him as the younger Stillwell brother. He seemed in a hurry, didn't stop to talk like he normally would, just nodded and kept riding north. Didn't think much of it until I heard about them going missing." Palmer's statement suggested that at least Jeremiah Stillwell had left the property deliberately, taking provisions with him. This contradicted the scene at the cabin, with its half-eaten meal and abandoned personal items. Had Jeremiah fled while Elias remained? Had Elias been a victim of his own brother? Or was there some other explanation for the seemingly contradictory evidence? Sheriff Harrington expanded the search to areas north of the county, sending telegrams to authorities in neighboring regions with descriptions of the Stillwell brothers. No confirmed sightings were reported. As the investigation proceeded through the spring and summer of 1868, more details emerged about the brothers' background, or lack thereof. Attempts to trace their claimed Kentucky origins proved fruitless. No records of Elias or Jeremiah Stillwell could be found in Kentucky or surrounding states. Their past before arriving in Webster County remained a blank slate. This lack of verifiable history raised the possibility that Stillwell was an assumed name, perhaps adopted to obscure a criminal past elsewhere. Sheriff Harrington sent inquiries to law enforcement, in multiple states, seeking information about similar crimes or suspects matching the brothers' descriptions. Another discovery added to the growing body of evidence against the brothers. In the hidden chamber where personal belongings had been found, investigators located a small journal wedged behind a loose stone in the wall. The journal, apparently belonging to Jeremiah Stilwell, contained entries dating from 1864 to 1866. Most entries were mundane notes about weather or chores, but several contained disturbing references. One entry from August 1864 read, "E says the stew needs more salt. Travelers don't notice any difference. Sometimes I wonder if they suspect. The well keeps our secret." Another, dated April 1865, stated, "3 men today. Army deserters. E said too risky, but they had good boots and a fine rifle. No one will look for them. Used the special herbs in their coffee." These cryptic entries suggested not only that the brothers had been killing travelers for years, but that they had developed methods to incapacitate their victims, possibly using poison. The reference to the well was particularly disturbing, as it hinted that evidence might be hidden there. Sheriff Harrington ordered the well to be drained and examined. The task proved difficult and dangerous, with the well extending over 60 feet into the limestone beneath the property. When workers finally reached the bottom, they found a layer of silt and debris approximately 3 feet deep. Among the items recovered from the well were numerous small bones, later identified as finger and toe bones, several teeth, buttons, a gold wedding band inscribed with the initials MH to JH, 1858, and a small leather pouch containing what appeared to be human hair of various colors tied with thread into neat bundles. Dr. Hayes examined these findings and concluded that the well had likely been used to dispose of certain remains that were not processed for other purposes. His report noted that the preservation of these items suggested they had been in the well for varying lengths of time, some possibly as long as 3 years. The discovery in the well provided further evidence of the brothers' crimes, but still left many questions unanswered. The most pressing remained. What had happened to Elias and Jeremiah Stilwell? By August 1868, with no further leads and the brothers still missing, the active investigation began to wind down. Sheriff Harrington maintained that the case remained open, but resources were redirected to more pressing matters. The Stilwell property, considered a scene of horrific crimes, remained abandoned, the county unable to legally dispose of it without resolution regarding its owners. The story of the Stilwell brothers and their gruesome hospitality quickly entered local folklore. Parents warned children to be wary of strangers offering food or shelter. Travelers through the area gave the property a wide berth, crossing themselves as they passed. The cabin itself began to deteriorate, vegetation gradually reclaiming the cleared land around it. For almost a century, the case would remain officially unsolved, though locals had little doubt about the brothers' guilt. The question of their fate, however, continued to provoke speculation and debate. Some believed they had escaped justice, fleeing to the Western Territories or perhaps even overseas. Others theorized that they had fallen victim to one of their intended targets, a traveler who had discovered their true nature and turned the tables on his would-be killers. A third theory, whispered rather than spoken aloud, suggested that the brothers had ultimately turned on each other, their partnership dissolving into murderous conflict. This theory gained some support from the scene at the cabin, the half-eaten meal, the abandoned belongings, which hinted at a sudden and unexpected end to their operation. Whatever the truth, the Stilwell brothers and their terrible crimes faded into history, becoming just another dark legend of the Ozark Hills. For decades, the case remained closed but unsolved, the brothers' fate unknown, and their victims largely forgotten. The Stilwell case might have remained merely a dark footnote in Ozark history if not for Clarence Thornton, a history professor at Missouri State University, then Southwest Missouri State College, who developed an interest in unsolved crimes of the region. In 1952, while researching for a book on frontier justice, Thornton requested access to Webster County's archived records. During a renovation of the Webster County Courthouse that same year, workers discovered a sealed compartment in the basement containing documents thought lost in a fire in 1892. Among these were additional records relating to the Stillwell case, including detailed inventories of items found in the hidden chamber and several photographs taken at the scene, some of the earliest crime scene photography in Missouri history. The photographs, though deteriorated, showed the cabin interior, the excavated tunnel, and the collection of personal items. One particularly unsettling image captured the smokehouse interior with its hanging meats, taken before their true nature was discovered. The clinical detachment of the black and white image somehow made it more disturbing when viewed with the knowledge of what it actually depicted. Thornton also uncovered correspondence between Sheriff Harrington and authorities in other states that hadn't been included in the official case file. Most significantly, he found a letter from the sheriff of Daviess County, Kentucky, responding to Harrington's inquiries about the Stillwell brothers. The letter, dated June 3, 1868, stated, "No record of Stillwell brothers as described. However, case from 1861 bears similar patterns. Brothers Ezekiel and Joshua Hartley disappeared following accusations of grave robbing and customer poisoning at their roadside tavern. Descriptions match your suspects. Ezekiel would now be approx. 37 years, Joshua 34. Both known for unusual interest in anatomy and preservation methods. Joshua worked briefly as assistant to local doctor before dismissal for unspecified misconduct. This connection suggested the Stillwell brothers had likely been the Hartleys, who had changed their identities and relocated to Missouri during the chaos of the Civil War. Their pattern of predatory behavior had apparently begun earlier and in another state, adding a new dimension to the case. Further research by Thornton uncovered additional details about the Hartley brothers. Newspaper archives from Kentucky revealed that the brothers had operated a small tavern called Hartley's Rest on a road between Owensboro and Hartford from 1858 to 1861. The establishment had gained a reputation for serving unusually flavorful stews and meat pies, drawing travelers despite its remote location. In early 1861, suspicions arose when the local cemetery reported evidence of grave tampering. Around the same time, several travelers who had stopped at Hartley's Rest were reported missing by their families. Local authorities began an investigation, but before they could question the brothers thoroughly, Ezekiel and Joshua Hartley disappeared, abandoning their tavern overnight. The parallels to the Stillwell case were striking. Brothers operating a roadside establishment catering to travelers, unexplained disappearances, and a sudden vanishing act when suspicions arose. The physical descriptions and ages matched as well, supporting the theory that the Hartleys had reinvented themselves as the Stillwells and continued their predatory activities in Missouri. Thornton published his findings in the Journal of Ozark Studies in 1953, bringing renewed attention to the long cold case. His article, Serving More Than Water, The Stillwell Brothers' Reign of Terror, presented the most complete account of the case to date, incorporating both the original investigation and his own discoveries. Following Thornton's publication, an elderly woman named Sarah Wilkes contacted him with a story passed down in her family. Her grandfather, James Wilkes, had been a member of Sheriff Harrington's search party in 1868. According to family lore, the search had uncovered more than was officially reported. Grandfather wouldn't speak of it much, her letter to Thornton stated, but on his deathbed in 1911, he told my father about a hidden room they found beneath the cabin floor. Said it contained what he called instruments of torture and a chair with restraints. Sheriff Harrington ordered them not to include it in reports to spare the families of the missing. Grandfather said he never slept right after what he saw there. This account, while impossible to verify independently, aligned with certain inconsistencies in the official records. Several pages appeared to be missing from the inventory of items found on the property, with numbering that jumped from page 7 to page 11. Whether these pages were intentionally removed or lost to time remains unknown. Thornton's research also uncovered a curious detail about the brothers' disappearance. The abandoned meal on their table had included 2 plates, yet evidence suggested a third person had been present. A third chair at the table was pulled out, and a partial footprint in spilled stew was of a different size than either brother's known footwear. This led to speculation that the brothers might have been interrupted during a meal by someone who then either killed them or forced them to flee. But who this third person might have been, and what their connection to the brothers was, remained a mystery. Thornton's work inspired others to investigate the case. Amateur historians and true crime enthusiasts began combing through newspaper archives and county records across the Midwest, looking for any trace of the Stillwell-Hartley brothers or similar crimes that might be connected to them. In 1954, a librarian in Jefferson City discovered a newspaper article from the St. Louis, Missouri Republican, dated January 18, 1862, describing the arrest of 2 brothers named Harlow for suspicious behavior and possession of personal effects not their own. The brothers were held briefly but released due to lack of evidence. The physical description matched the Stillwell-Hartley brothers, suggesting they may have adopted multiple identities during their criminal career. Another researcher found records from a small town in southern Illinois, indicating that 2 brothers named Stillman had operated a boarding house there for approximately 6 months in early 1863 before abruptly departing following the disappearance of a guest. Again, the descriptions matched, hinting at a pattern of movement and identity changes as the brothers stayed one step ahead of suspicion. These discoveries painted a picture of the brothers as calculating predators who had refined their methods over time, learning from each close call and becoming more careful with each new identity. By the time they established themselves in Webster County as the Stillwells, they had apparently developed a system that allowed them to prey on travelers for years without detection. In 1955, construction workers clearing land for a new highway approximately 12 miles north of the former Stillwell property made a grim discovery. While excavating a hillside, they unearthed human remains buried in a shallow grave. The remains, examined by the medical examiner, were determined to be those of a male in his 30s who had died approximately 90 years earlier. The cause of death was clear: a single gunshot wound to the back of the skull. With the remains was a pocket watch with the initials ES engraved on the inside of the case. This led investigators to believe they had found Elias Stillwell, apparently murdered and buried far from the cabin he had shared with his brother. The location aligned with Theodore Palmer's 1868 statement about seeing Jeremiah Stillwell riding north on December 11, 1867. Had Jeremiah killed his brother and fled? Or had some third party killed Elias and forced Jeremiah to flee? Further examination of the remains revealed additional details. The medical examiner noted that the victim's right hand was missing entirely, apparently removed post-mortem with a sharp instrument. This unusual detail seemed ritualistic rather than practical, suggesting something more complex than a simple murder. The discovery of what appeared to be Elias Stillwell's remains